A note about Benjamin Graham by Jason Zweig. Who was Benjamin Graham and why should you listen to him? Graham was not one of the best investors who ever lived. He was also the greatest practical investment thinker of all time. Before Graham, money managers behaved much like a medieval guide, guided largely by superstition, guesswork, and arcane rituals. Graham's security analysis was the textbook that transformed this musty circle into a modern profession. And The Intelligent Investor is the first book ever to describe, for individual investors, the emotional framework and analytical tools that are essential to financial success. It remains the single best book on investing ever written for the general public. The Intelligent Investor was the first book I read when I joined Forbes magazine as a club reporter in 1987, and I was struck by Graham's certainty that sooner or later all bull markets must end badly. That October, US stocks suffered their worst one day crash in history, and I was hooked. Today, after the wild bull market of the late 1990s and the brutal bear market that began in early 2000, the intelligent investor reads more prophetically than ever. Graham came by his insights the hard way, by feeling firsthand the anguish of financial loss and by studying for decades the history and psychology of the markets. He was born Benjamin Grobbaum on May 9, 1894, in London. His father was a dealer in china dishes and figurines. The family moved to New York when Ben was a year old. At first, they lived the good life, with a maid, a cook, and a French governess on Upper Fifth Avenue. But Ben's father died in 1903. The porcelain business faltered, and the family slid haltingly into poverty. Ben's mother turned their home into a boarding house, then borrowing money to trade stocks on margin. She was wiped out in the crash of 1907. For the rest of his life, Ben would recall the humiliation of cashing a check for his mother and hearing the bank teller ask, "Is Dorothy Grosbaum good for $5?" Fortunately, Graham won a scholarship at Columbia, where his brilliance burst into full flower. He graduated in 1914, second in his class. Before the end of Graham's final semester, three departments, English, philosophy, and mathematics, asked him to join the faculty. He was all of 20 years old. Instead of academia, Graham decided to give Wall Street a shot. He started as a clerk at a bond trading firm, soon became an analyst, then a partner, and before long was running his own investment partnership. The internet boom and bust would not have surprised Graham. In April 1919, he earned a 250% return on the first day of trading for Savoy Tire, a new offering in the booming automotive industry. By October, the company had been exposed as a fraud and the stock was worthless. Graham became a master at researching stocks in microscopic, almost molecular details. In 1925, plowing through the obscure reports filled by oil pipelines with the US Interstate Commerce Commission, he learned that Northern Pipeline Corporation, then trading at $65 per share, held at least $80 per share in high quality bonds. He bought the stock, pestered its managers into raising the dividend, and came away with $110 per share 3 years later. Despite a harrowing loss of nearly 70% during the Great Crash of 1929 to 1932, Graham survived and thrived in its aftermath, harvesting bargains from the wreckage of the bull market. There is no exact record of Graham's earliest return, but from 1936 until he retired in 1956, his Graham Newman Corp gained at least 14.7% annually versus 12.2% for the stock markets as a whole, one of the best long term track records on Wall Street history. How did Graham do it? Combining his extraordinary intellectual powers with profound common sense and vast experience. Graham developed his core principles, which are at least as valid today as they were during his lifetime. A stock is not just a ticker symbol or an electronic blip. It is an ownership interest in an actual business, which an underlying value that does not depend on its share price. The market is a pendulum that forever swings between unsustainable optimism, which makes stocks too expensive, and unjustified pessimism, which makes them too cheap. The intelligent investor is a realist who sells to optimists and buys from the pessimists. The future value of every investment is a function of its present price. The higher the price you pay, the lower your return will be. No matter how careful you are, the one risk no investor can ever eliminate is the risk of being wrong. Only by insisting on what Graham called the margin of safety, never overpaying, no matter how exciting an investment seems to be, can you minimize your odds of error. The secret to your financial success is inside yourself. If you become a critical thinker who takes no Wall Street fact on faith and you invest in patience confidence, you can take steady advantage of even the worst bear markets. By developing your discipline and courage, you can refuse to let other people's mood swings govern your financial destiny. In the end, how your investments behave is much less important than how you behave. The goal of this revised edition of The Intelligent Investor is to apply Graham's ideas to today's financial markets while leaving his text entirely intact. With the exception of footnotes for clarification, after each of Graham's chapter, you'll find a new commentary. In these reader's guides, I have added recent examples that should show you just how relevant and how liberating Graham's principles remain today. I envy you the excitement and an enlightenment of reading Graham's masterpiece for the first time, or even the third or fourth time. Like all classics, it alters how we view the world and renew itself by educating us. And the more you read it, the better it gets. With Graham as your guide, you are guaranteed to become a vastly more intelligent investor.